allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the first item on the agenda is our public meeting on the 25-26 tentative master agreement. So we had a really quick tentative agreement reached with NADA last week, and so I think you all have one of these at your seats, as well as the red line master for the contract. The presentation kind of takes you through the summary, so that's kind of what I'm going to go through. So NADA did vote last Wednesday to approve the tentative agreement. You see on the second page the folks who were on the team, so special thanks to Jason Egley, Melissa Kelly, Craig Ward, Ben Fallbush. ISTA UniServe Director Sue Ellen Sofer attended. She's been here, I think this is her third contract she's helped NADA negotiate, and then Lori and Beth were sitting with me. So I started out sharing with NADA kind of what our education fund revenue forecast had been, and that was assuming a projected enrollment of 1441. As you know, this year the state added curricular fees into our basic grant. It wasn't a reimbursement amount that after we figured out what our enrollment was, they would give us X number of dollars per student. So it just got included into what our enrollment projection was. So the state, that's last meeting, you voted on an MOU for us to hold back from any new revenues the amount that we anticipated spending. That was the curricular fee amount the state provided. So that was about $232,000 we were projecting, guessing, not knowing where our enrollment was exactly going to be. So if we had had that enrollment and took off that $232,000, we'd have actually been in deficit spending. And again, reminded everyone that students right now with state revenue, basic ADM monies are just over $7,200. Fast forward, our actual enrollment ended up at 1463. So we were 20 some higher than we were anticipating being, which helped immensely. So again, I kind of showed them what that Form 54, which is just a screenshot of a revenue projection. It's an estimate, an estimator worksheet that we can pull from. Is it ever exactly correct? Because nothing ever stays exactly like you were predicting, no. But I did want to add in that we have probably around 1445, 1450 students in person, and we kind of are fluctuating 18 to 20 in our virtual. So our Belmont Next definitely helped us have revenue to work with NADA on our compensation plan. Again, that revenue alone was not going to be a lot to do what we needed and wanted to do for staff. Some additional considerations for this year coming from the state. The state had a legislative edict that schools needed to get $45,000 starting salary. We, at the beginning of this year, are at $43,000. So that was going to be a heavy lift to get starting teachers to that and then kick it up something on down some kind of salary schedule. We also, this was the year that the literacy endorsement that had been passed had to be, staff who received that and had that on their license had to be given some kind of pay differential for possessing that. They upped what we had to spend from our ed fund on teacher salaries from 63% to 65% this year. And they also had an additional commentary that you get, we'll talk about this in a moment, but there's 5 factors and you have to base your compensation increases on at least 2 of those factors. This year they're requiring academic needs be at least one of them, and 10% of your raise, that maximum raise any one person could get, has to be attributable to academic needs. None of us understand why that was the perspective, but that was one of the requirements. And then, you know, the hits just keep on coming, and our post-term contributions for retirement are going up in January from 9.5 to 10.1%. Some local changes. We had been really helped out in the last 2 years by the On My Way Pre-K and CCDF vouchers to help offset some of our expenses for preschool. And the state, in a surprise move, at least it was surprising to most schools that I have been talking to and listening to, that number, that voucher amount was cut in half, and they also severely limited how many vouchers were going to be released. And so we anticipated that number probably would go down by half to 2/3 of people who were even be eligible to receive that. So that means there are going to be several $100,000 that we were expecting to have to supplement again from education fund that we had been receiving through those vouchers. Insurance, 2 weeks ago, was voted to premiums to go up by 4%. That's about $53,000 increase across the district for the people who currently take our insurance plans. Again, while our enrollment is not decreasing as quickly as may have been projected at times, it still is decreasing. So any loss in student is a loss of $7,200, and that accrues pretty quickly. And last thing, talking a little more specifically about our curricular fees. This year, our curricular expenses are close to $640,000. That's really high. Why is that high? Well, the state also mandated in K-8 we had to have curricula that aligned to science and reading, and so we did adopt that. Typically, when schools have adopted new curricula from textbook companies in the past, they let you spread that out over 5 years. Now that is not the case. They wanted payment in full up front, even though you were going to be buying subscriptions or digital licenses or whatever every year. They wanted it all paid in advance. I did negotiate with them to get basically 3 payments over 12 to 18 months just to try to get it over a couple different budget cycles. So that complicated, that's part of the reason that amount is so high in this year. We also have had some savings in our curricular fees account to help offset the cost of new purchases of our freshman laptops we purchase every year, and then replacements for our laptops as we need to purchase them. That's around $250,000 a year. In curricular fees, it wasn't atypical for us to have to just absorb $80,000 to $100,000. This year, we're expecting with between what the state reimburses and what we may be able to collect in charging for some curricular fees, we'll still have to probably absorb another $156,000 over what we had been used to. So expenses have gone up tremendously in the last few years.
Kim,
Yes.
on the, we talked about where the $640,000 had to be paid up front. Do you expect that to be true in the future too, that they're going to ask us for that to be rather than spreading it out? Or
I hope not. I don't know why.
Do you know what contributed to that decision?
No, I don't know what contributed to that. I have a suspicion with how fluid the states have been on science of reading and making determinations on what is acceptable instructional practices and curricula, that they were afraid that there would be changes in what was approved and not approved.
And then they would lose out.
That's what my guess is.
Yeah, I could see that.
I also think publishing companies have taken a big hit with the move to so much more digital, so I don't know that they have as much to float, would be another guess.
Their margin is probably much smaller than it used to be.
I would say.
Okay.
It was a surprise. I was not expecting it.
Yeah.
Needless to say. So again, as I told Nada, usually with this kind of data, it would mean there would not be a raise this year. Fortunately, we were able to work with Stifel and get some creative things done. We did save some money just from retirements and replacing folks with less senior teachers. We did not replace one position because we had a kind of a boom in kindergarten for a couple of years, and it's kind of gone back to normal. A lot of schools are reporting, for example, that the COVID babies are now entering kindergarten and there's fewer. Lots of schools are reporting a smaller kindergarten class, so we didn't rip anyone, but just didn't replace a position through attrition and moved a kindergarten teacher to a different grade level. So that was some savings. Did move partial salaries of 2 administrators and 1 classified staff that had been paid from education fund to operations, which is looking much healthier for us as far as revenue. That's not the case that most schools are reporting. Most schools are really struggling in their operations. So we're blessed to have that ability to do that and still kind of jockey through. We were also able to throttle down our ed to ops transfer from 7.9 to 2%, so that's about a $250,000 savings right there. Of course, we're going to have to keep monitoring that, but again, with Chad Blacklock's projections, we should be okay. Prayerfully that the next legislative session, we're hearing they're going to continue to address property taxes, and we never know how that will impact us. But so we'll keep hoping nothing too terrible from there. And then, of course, we are going to try to recoup a little bit of money from some curricular fees, which we'll talk about a little later tonight. So the outcomes of bargaining, we did get to $45,000 starting salary, and we did agree on $250 added to the base of any teacher who has that early literacy endorsement added to their license. This year, we only have 8 because in the contract we agreed with NADA on the date of by October 15th, they had to have that on their license to be eligible to get that bump for this year. Every year it will be if you have it by October 15th of next year, for example, you can have it added. We only had 8 folks this year that currently have it. A whole slew are going to have it by next year, just because of people having different license renewal times and didn't want to renew earlier than they needed to.
One question on that 250, then next year, the same people, will they get the 250 added to
No,
their base, or is this a one-time?
This is a one-time permanent add to their base,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
There was the option from the state of an initial possession versus continual possession, and the continual possession would have been a yearly add-on. We didn't get a lot of guidance from the state as to what was acceptable, so we're all taking a stab in the dark and hoping we're not going to get feedback that says that's not enough, or we need to do something differently, but that's what we agreed on for now. The one thing to remember with this early literacy endorsement is a little confusing because they did come out with monies to pay the teachers for the course and pay them a stipend for taking the course, and then also they made available vouchers for them to take the praxis test they had to take and pass. So there was a lot of compensation that got tied to this up front, and a lot of staff have expressed satisfaction with, I got a pretty good stipend, I got it paid for, it was time, which was not fun. But, and then as far as the insurance premium increases, we did not really change a whole lot. We just kept the same percentage split between North Adams and the teacher. And you can see in the yellow column there, that is what the teacher will see as an increase to their paycheck every 24 deductions. And then you see the percent we're paying, it was the same as we paid last year. I talked a minute ago about you have to have at least 2 factors to attribute any raises to base you give of 5. Those 5 are basically years experience and education, of which you can't have more than 50% of the raise attribute to that. Evaluation, status, or results of the previous year, instructional leadership, or academic needs of students. For us, we have some eligibility statements that they have had to at least qualify for a year of credit as defined by the in-person retirement, have to be under contract this year, of course, and have had to receive a rating of effective or highly effective last year. So the factors that we are using this year are evaluation, instructional leadership, which is this teacher who newly possesses a literacy endorsement, and then academic need, and how that's going to be distributed. If they had an effective or highly effective rating last year for returning staff, that is a $500 increase to base. Instructional leadership is an additional $250 increase to base. Academic needs, a little bit more complicated, but basically what it amounts to is that after you increase the salary by $500 for the evaluation piece, everyone at least gets $1,500, a combination of a stipend or increase to base. Some people got more, and I think I have that kind of laid out here in a moment. But there was a lot of mathematics that had to go into figuring out what someone's raise and or stipend would be. We didn't have a whole lot of language. We did add back 6th grade basketball for boys and girls to our ECA schedule. It had been on there years ago, and then as we've been talking about wanting to expand the opportunities for our middle school and hopefully elementary soon kids, we added that back in, and then we did add a 19-week position for the elementary. You see the new versus 24-25 salary schedule, and on the left I kind of show you how many staff members received different raise amounts and or stipends. Basically how the new salary schedule was designed. Again, we had to go from 43,000 to 45,000, and we have a lot of compression, meaning the steps are really close together in the beginning. So we had to increase by quite a lot the earlier parts of the salary schedule. Knowing we didn't have a lot of money to play with, we tried to condense or compress some of those steps as it got further on, because we had had some $800,000, $900,000 steps in the later salary schedule, and the top end of our salary schedule has been more competitive with area schools as opposed to our early and mid-level. So I was trying to use the monies that we could have available to really impact getting to that new starting salary and trying to just get everyone something. So a big part of our staff are getting a nice healthy raise, I feel, and in wanting to make sure that the staff that are toward the top end also had, when possible, something added to their base. Everyone got something to their base, at least 500 up to, looks like I think 2,500 was the range of raises to base. And then again, everyone got between a raise and a stipend had to get at least $1,500 for this year. We also there in that bottom left corner kind of showed you how everything shook out with the total new monies to base, the amount toward cash stipends, the amount for our different benefits that we have to pay for. Because our ECA schedule is built on first-year teacher pay, there's always an automatic increase. Every time we increase first-year teacher pay, it automatically increases the amount that we are going to have expend for ECAs. And then for the teachers part, the people in the CBU unit, what the 4% increase in insurance would mean for new monies from our budget, and then the amount we spent this year on just the literacy endorsements. I'm not going to go through these because this was more what NADA used to explain to their staff, but you also have this page, and this was kind of we came up with to help folks understand kind of how this worked. We came up with 4 different scenarios to help them explain how their new raise and or stipend were calculated. So we started out with 2 new hires, one with no years experience, one with 2 years experience coming in, and under state IRB rules, new hires basically are a whole different ballgame when it comes to your contract. Basically, you don't have to use eligibility, you don't have to use factors, you just determine where a new hire is going to be. The one in the peach orangey color is someone in that 16 years experience. And so again, it's talking about, so you're getting paid right now in 24-25 what was at 18 years experience, but you're at 19 years experience potentially, or a year more experience. Again, you have to remember some of these folks in 24-25 have received hard to fill monies, master's bumps, whatever might make them earn more than what corresponds to years experience. So really what I emphasize to the staff is we grouped you by how much you were making last year on your base, and then determine what the next step for you would be. The green is for those folks that are in that part of the salary schedule where we weren't going to see a lot of growth as far as the steps went. And then the final folks in the yellow are those who already had topped out, who were above our top out salary, and so they received a evaluation, that $500 to their base, and the remainder was stipend. for their compensation plan. And then there were some examples if this person got the literacy endorsement or if they didn't, and how the stipend was calculated if they received one. And then there's always some questions amongst staff as to, we do have healthy, not unrealistic or unreasonable cash balance. I'm certain for folks just looking at it, it looks like it's a lot, but it takes a lot of money to run a school system this size. And so also trying to provide some explanation as to why right now we wouldn't necessarily use cash balance. Number one, it's not a consistent source of revenue. It's the accumulation of lots of reimbursements from different things, unspent monies, yes. Some things that we save, like you're not going to replace your servers in technology every year, but you better have a good amount set back for when you have to, some of those kinds of things. So kind of just, again, we try to be transparent of what is our cash balance, talk to them about what our financial consultants really tell us we need to have as our targets. We're a little bit above sometimes. As you can see, what I start talking about is we are going to start eating into that cash balance as the revenue has slowed down. Right now, it does not appear that the legislature probably is going to do a lot of increasing of our revenue. And there might be some things that happen that actually decrease that revenue, especially in operations. So one of the reasons we are not, as a corporation with a declining enrollment, many corporations in that situation have had to have RIFs this past year. We have not, and we're providing a raise because we have a healthy cash balance, because we have been frugal, because we can be more agile and weather these storms for a little longer. And so that is why, as I tried to explain, you want to keep, not an unreasonable, but a healthy cash balance, because we are in a business that you have very little control of your revenue. It's kind of what is provided you. And so when it's unpredictable and you can't really do a whole lot to change it, you have to have some stores in the back to make sure that you can. That isn't to say if things got so large that you wouldn't be able to give more as probably a stipend at some point. I don't think we're at that point right now. And then the last thing I really just entreated everyone is that as far as raises to teachers go with NADA, children attending North Adams are how raises are provided, because it's based on ADM. And so just really reminding everyone about talking up the good things they know are happening here, being very vocal about that, making sure that we're attending to our data and regularly reviewing that and making sure that we are achieving high achievement, high growth, talking about it to friends and neighbors, and being aware of the programs, even if it's not in your grade level or subject area, so that you can promote them. Because in the end, that it's not you as a board or me as a superintendent that gives raises. We can only give what we have, and that's students in seats are what provides that revenue for education.
I mean, you make a very valid point about cash reserves, also rainy day. District nearby that have used rainy day for salaries, and now they're really needing to catch up, because that's a pot of money that doesn't increase every year for salaries. So
At
that's
most,
smart.
you might be able to do a stipend, that's a one-time,
Yeah.
but you couldn't do anything, it was a recurring piece.
Just like you don't really want grants to be paying ongoing salaries, because it'll run out.
I like this explanation. It's always been hard, I think, well, being on the board, but trying to identify each bucket and when you can spend it, how you can spend it, and the wise you can spend it has always been a difficult piece for anybody to understand. So it helps define it a lot more. And again, like we said, we may have a larger cash balance in one, but there's still restrictions on how the money can be used. So I think just the information itself is very key.
Good thing is, the positive message is, I think our staff had a good raise this year at a time that I don't know that they were expecting to. So I'm happy about that. hopefully it's something we can continue, so.
Thank you.
There's no action that's needed, this is just the public hearing. If anyone had questions or commentary, and for you folks to kind of understand what the tentative agreement is. So next month is when it will be ratified or be up to be ratified by you folks. So you'll see it again. We won't have to go through it all again, but this is just one of those requirements by ERB that we have to have in the legislature, that we have to have a public meeting to allow for public input on the tentative agreement.
Okay, well, we can suspend that and resume our regular meeting, and we'll start with public comment on agenda items. No, I think with none, we can move on to our consent items.
I don't have a lot of commentary. I do want, even though I know we've addressed it once already when their retirement letter was put forth. But Ernie Suman, Mr. Ernie, one of our elementary custodians, and Becky Suman, his wife, their last day working for North Adams is going to be this Friday. So we just want to wish them a happy retirement, and I hope they get to do a lot of things to enjoy themselves. I know the kids will miss Ernie and his magic tricks. Things he does.
Any questions or comments or motions to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve the consensus items as presented.
Motion by Michelle, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Darlene. Motion by Michelle, seconded by Darlene, to approve the consensus items as presented. All those in favor, announce by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Approved 4-0. No program update this evening, so we'll move on to old business.
So last week you had, or last month, excuse me, you had the Belmont Next handbook. I had not received any comments or questions from anyone. Again, I would just emphasize the team is continually figuring out things that we need to address for next year, because it is a work in progress. If it were just virtual, it would be its own. It would be a lot more of a concrete answer, but since it is a hybrid program as well, as some students are mixing in person and online, that has created a lot more questions, and so do expect changes next year, but this is our starting point.
Okay. Any questions or comments or a motion to approve?
Make a motion to approve.
Motion by Darlene, is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Wiley. Motion by Darlene, second by Wiley, to approve the Belmont Next handbook as presented. All those in favor, announce by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Approved 4-0. Next, we have new business with the 2026 budget resolutions.
That's
All
smart.
right.
Yeah. No.
Okay, so Beth has been working a lot in the last several months to do all the steps that we have to do with the state to get a budget approved. So the first resolution that you're asked to approve is the Capital Projects Fund. And there's not a ton of information on what you have in your sheet in front of you. I am going to tell you for the Capital Projects Fund, there's only 2 items this year. Again, we are decreasing the amount we're trying to budget, again, to try to not have to have as much transfer, and leaning on our lease bonds, which have been very helpful for us. We're only financing about $500,500 for capital projects, and the 2 projects we're focusing on are continuing our brick tuck pointing. We're just doing a little bit every year to go around the building to make sure that our walls are tight, and whatever things need fixed, that lintels are damaged and things like that. And then starting to replace a bunch of our electrical panels in the original parts of the high school and middle school. And so again, we're not going to do them all at once, but it's going to be how many ever we can do with that amount. Those 2 things together, about $150,000 are for the brick tuck pointing, $350,000 to start replacing electrical panels. So those are our 2 big projects this year from the operations budget with cap projects. Any questions on that one? Then the next is the bus replacement plan, and that one's really simple. We aren't replacing any buses this year. We will have to next year, but we are, again, in an attempt to maximize our operations dollars, going to try to keep our buses at least 15 years. Luckily, our buses, especially most of them being city routes, don't get a ton of miles, so we can, and we rotate them between the county and the city on different years, so that helps. We are probably going to need another lift bus because we have two now, but the one we have is starting to get some age on it, and we'll want to use it as a backup and probably purchase another one. And then we have one of our full-size buses that probably needs replaced.
There's only in our fleet now.
Do you know the answer off the top of your head?
I mean,
I think we have 13
I was gonna ask,
full-time. but
how many buses there?
I think we have 13 routes. I'm probably going to miscount off the top of my head.
That sounds about right.
13 to 15. I'm trying to remember CTE and special ed, our midday folks or full-day folks.
So we have 120 buses.
Yes.
You got about 20 buses?
We have about
Under 20.
100?
Under.
Oh, less than. We have to buy more property. I don't even think we're
Fewer than 20.
Yeah.
Yes.
We have a couple spares, which is
Yeah.
nice.
That's fine.
But
No buses, actual buses.
Yeah, I didn't mean to put
Vehicles.
it's all right. I'm not good with that kind of stuff. I have my reference.
But the ballpark is,
Yeah, it's under. Unfortunately, a lot of them are close and have been purchased within the same few years. So that's why we need to get busy on getting a replacement schedule so that we're not
It's
having to
sort
do
of
several in one.
spreads it out a little
Yeah.
more, you know. That makes perfect sense.
Let's see, then the appropriation and tax rates, again, we're looking at, we control our debt service. Our debt service has been the 0.4778 or 0.4779 for the last 3-4 years. Our operations fluctuates depending upon what assessed value. So right now, we're looking at a total tax rate of about $1.13. So that's just what the calculations come out to. This is what we're asking for. Again, do we ever get that much? No. But that's okay.
It's the Christmas list.
It's the Christmas list, exactly. And then the last request for resolution is just the overall budget. And I guess at this point, Beth, is there anything else?
I don't think so.
So any questions or comments or motion to approve the 26 budget resolution as presented?
I'll make a motion for.
Motion by Wiley, is there a second? Seconded by Darlene. Motion by Wiley, seconded by Darlene to approve the 2026 budget resolutions. All those in favor announce by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Approved 4-0. Next up is the approval of the 25-26 updated curricular cost to the district fees.
So this has been another big project. Lori and Beth have worked on it quite a bit, and actually it's been worked on, I think, 3 separate times at this point, if not more. So as you know, 2 years ago, I think the state came out and basically said schools should not charge anything for curricular fees, textbook fees is what they said. And then they gave us around $157 a student is what it came out to be. They didn't really reimburse us by student, it's just that was their calculator, basically. In this last legislative session, when there wasn't a lot of state revenue that was going to go toward education, and they were going to wrap it into the basic grant for ADM, there was some backpedaling on, well, we never meant that you couldn't charge anything, we just didn't want you charging for a textbook. Well, that's different. Okay. So there are several schools, whether it's this year or next year, that are going back and looking at what we can charge and what we should charge. And so you have in the packet, Beth and Lori have gone through, and for all of our grade levels and/or courses, separated things out by the things that should not be allowable to be charged, which are our textbooks and, well, basically a textbook. Anything that is an actual textbook. One of the things that has been the most difficult thing to try to absorb is they also did not consider anything about most of us are one-to-one with devices and they have to be replaced often. And so they did not disallow us from charging for technology. Previously, and this was all the way back in 22-23 was the last time we charged for curricular fees. I think we had charged around $100 to $106 for the kids' iPads or laptops. And usually that was just like a homeroom charge, and you saw the whole amount on there. Because the state has given us, it's been a little bit nebulous of the guidance they've given us on what we can charge for and what we can't. We went through and for those courses, and this is mostly secondary, that did not have their textbook delivered digitally, we did assign a $15 technology fee. So we are doing the technology fee by course based upon whether their textbook is delivered digitally or not. So I kind of have some basic, you see kind of what the grade levels for elementary are going to be. I can tell you in 22-23, I would say the average per grade level per student textbook fee, curricular fee was around $135 to $140 each. So right now, all of them are below, well, they're all below 85 right now, ranging from about 70, well, one's 53 to about 85. So significantly less, which is one of the goals we have, but again, we're trying to recoup something for the extra expenses we're getting. Sixth grade in 22-23 was around between 160 and 204. I kind of did what a sixth grader may take because there's electives in the middle school. Theirs is going to be under $100. Seventh grade's between 207 and 234, and 22-23 theirs are going to be just over 100, potentially, depending on, again, if they take music or an engineering course or something. And then eighth grade was around 169 to 208. A few years ago, it's going to be around 110 to 115 right now. High school is a whole other animal because it really depends on what courses you take, and some courses are a lot more expensive because of the supplies that they use. But again, in 22-23, high school curricular fees ranged from $145 to $674, depending on what you took. So the average of that was about $241. Right now, I would say the average freshman's going to have around a $235 fee. 10th grader, around 100, and again, some of that depends on what you take. A 10th grader might be 136. 11th graders looking like probably going to be around 213. 12th graders going to be in that 230 range as well. So again, high school, our average is closer to what it was previously, again, but it does depend on what you're taking. Some of the dual credit classes can be a little more expensive if they have to have a new book, college course book. Some of our lab classes, depending upon the lab supplies, are more expensive than others. So what you're being asked today basically is allowing us to separate total curricular cost you're approving, but then also approving what we would charge parents for these different courses. So the middle of that page is the total to the district for that course or that grade level, and then the second last three columns are billed to parents.
Any questions or comments or a motion to approve the 25-26 curricular costs?
I make the motion to approve as presented.
Motion by Michelle, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Wiley. Motion by Michelle, second by Wiley to approve the 25-26 updated curricular costs to the district. All those in favor announce by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Approved 4-0. Next is the 25-26 technology and consumable fees.
That's part of, you did them together.
Okay, I was as of
Hey,
reading it,
you
I'm
had
like, I
two
think
with
we
one.
did that. Okay,
2 for 1.
all right. Approval of the 26 health insurance rates.
So I kind of already went over with you that the overall premium went up 4%. You have this sheet, I think also at your seat, that kind of shows you for each plan what the increase was. The columns in blue are actually what the employee will experience as an increase on their paycheck. Except the top one is for those folks who are on what we call dual credit, the old dual credit program, so that's a one-time pay for them. When you hear 4%, which is far more than we've had increase in a while, it could have been a lot worse, I guess.
That's still, when you're talking insurance, it's still not a huge, I mean, it's plenty, but
Yeah, I think everybody's increased, I mean, healthcare in itself is.
The market is still going about 8% a year, and so we've been very lucky. We had that, we stayed, the premiums for, I think, 3 years in a row went up 3% last year, I think. 4%, so we're still way under what market increase has been, which is a blessing in those times.
Any questions or comments or motion to approve the 26 health insurance rates?
I'll make a motion to approve the rate.
Motion by Wiley, is there a second? Second by Darlene. Motion by Wiley, second by Darlene to approve the 26 health insurance rates. All those in favor, announce by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Approved 4-0. Next is policy updates. This is first reading.
I tell you, I am behind on policies, but they just had a whole new set come out 2 weeks ago, and we're still trying to get the ones from April put in, and we've been doing them, so there's just a lot.
It doesn't quit.
It does not, oh my gosh. Some of these, I don't understand even the purpose of some of the changes, because they weren't very extensive, but there's a few that we do have a lot to talk about. So the first one in your packet, and I kind of gave you a cover sheet, I'm getting smarter.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Very much.
I needed it for myself too. The first one is just a technical correction, so we could have had that in consensus items, and I forgot it was just a technical correction, but we'll just hold it here. So it's just minor verbiage, nothing of substance on the retaking a class. It changed, it added a who in the sentence. Okay. The next three are 1216, 3216, and 4216. This is all about dress and appearance. So 1216 is that for admin, 3216 are for teachers, 4216 are for classified, and 5511 addresses students. So on 1216, basically they changed grooming, what had been the word grooming for appearance now, and our current policy had that A through E all checked. I don't see a need to change any of those. Same thing on 3216, a few changes of verbiage, change from grooming to appearance. All A through E had been checked previously as well. Support staff, same thing. Few things that are a little bit more involved with 5511, which is student dress and appearance, because that starts getting into a lot of free speech type discussions and some of those laws. Again, changes for grooming, for appearance from grooming are the first few changes. A lot of it is just what our current handbook and educational law has been doing, where the principal is the final say on whether something is appropriate or inappropriate in terms of dress. It also talks about what might be protected speech and what may not be, so obscenities, things that incite violence or hate speech toward different groups of folks is not acceptable, or anything that could be vulgar, discriminatory, or create a disruption to the educational environment. Then it talks about if clothing can't be removed, concealed, like lots of times you might let a kid turn a t-shirt inside out or put a sweatshirt on over it. If it can't be, then calling the parent to have the parent either bring clothes, send them home, whatever. Usually our goal is to keep them here until it becomes a statement maybe, or a situation we've addressed multiple times. So that's that set. The next set is curriculum development, which again, not sure why this one wasn't considered a technical correction. The only thing that's different than just verbiage is that the last sentence on the bottom of page 8, that the superintendent may conduct innovative programs as are deemed necessary to grow the instructional program. Nothing too crazy on that one. Now the next one has quite a bit of options to choose from. Field trips and other trips. I tried to highlight in yellow everywhere that there were things that we needed to make a decision on options. So the superintendent, I am recommending, is the person who approves initially just the general field trips that don't have to come to you as a board. Out-of-state field trips, what we do currently, I would say we need to continue doing, come before you as a board to approve. I did not select that one on the bottom of page 9 because in our state, I can't imagine that we would need to put a mileage limit. I'm sure there are some states out west in particular that probably you would.
Or Alaska.
Yeah, exactly. On page 10, for extracurricular, co-curricular, I have the athletic director is the initial approval person. The next section, overnight travel, first by me and then by you, the board. International trips must be approved by the board. And we probably only, and again, I'll take conversation on this one. I recommend only approving international trips when it's a third-party company that's conducting it, so that we can make sure all the travel arrangements are taken care of, that they're done in a manner that make sure no one's getting
Especially in
lost.
this time, whirlwind.
And I did put that we also need to take into account for international travel, any travel warnings for Americans by the State Department that are put out. Then on page 11, I said that we can charge reasonable fees for field trips. Right now, the school does pay for a lot of the travel expenses on field trips. They have to, that basically, if a kid's on a field trip, they're under, it's a school-sponsored event and they're under board policy. The teacher who is planning the field trip is the person responsible for making sure all the paperwork, all the supervision, security plans, things like that are done. Has some rules on overnight field trips, which again are already practice we have, but just making sure that that's stated in policy to keep kids safe and to make sure there aren't unexpected costs that ensue. I recommend accepting the option in the middle of page 12 that the person responsible for the itinerary of the trip should not change that unless there's an emergency situation, or let's say you show up unexpectedly and the venue no longer has an option for you to do something, then potentially with administrative approval, if you can find something to substitute. So this one, the other section, last section on the bottom of page 12, so we do have a lot of staff members who do plan, for example, international trips, but sometimes it might be like a Washington DC trip, and it's not really a school-sponsored. So basically what this provides is, that's fine, we don't want the liability, but if you're going to solicit on school time for kids to participate. A lot of times they'll have a meeting here on school grounds and use the building as a call out for community and or current students to meet. It just needs to run through my office is what I've recommended, so that I at least know what's going on and we can make sure we are separate from it for liability purposes. So on to page 13, we selected option 1. We do pay for a large number of the transportation costs associated with most trips, particularly athletics, but there's 4 or 5 sports that are our revenue sports that the athletic department pays for. Okay, refresh my memory. The
Football, basketball, wrestling.
football, basketball, wrestling, they pay for the driver
Mm-hmm.
and fuel,
Mm-mm.
just driver.
Just drive.
Okay. It's confusing. I think that is because the athletic department probably doesn't have the revenue to pay for every single trip, and then so it's just a service we do so that kids can get what they're supposed to get. And we still pay for the fuel and wear and tear on the bus and provide the bus and all those things. So far, it hasn't been a problem. And then the bottom of 13 is if a coach or someone wants their child, basically anyone that is not part of the organization that's taking the trip, that needs to be approved by the administration. Career and technical program. The first page on 14 just has a lot of verbiage changes, and then page 15 starts a lot of the middle of it is all about if you want to offer a CTE course virtually, which we don't currently do. And then the second part is basically just verbiage that relates to the new employment honors seal. That's going to be one of the new graduation requirements, or one of the new diploma options, excuse me, and what that entails. It's just out of the DOE language. Guidance and counseling addresses their responsibilities under the new graduation requirements, and also puts in the requirements surrounding our attempts to try to get every senior to complete the FAFSA form. Then we have 3120 and 4120, which are about employment of professional staff and support staff. Again, not sure why, especially 3120 can't just be a technical correction. It's really just a couple words here and there. 4120 does address a little bit about the requirements for a Title I paraprofessional to be hired. And so we've updated what the state's expectations are on that meet probably what the federal grant says, and there's a lot of leeway there and a lot of different ways to obtain recertification. 3142 has just policy coming from the state about cancellation of a teaching contract. It inserts the 3 definitions: the probationary teacher, the professional teacher, the established teacher. That's a licensing distinction. And then what are the grounds for which a contract may be canceled. Nothing real surprising there, at least in our world. 5310 are health services. Not much there. Again, I don't understand why that one wasn't a technical correction, excuse me. 50, go
I have a
ahead.
question.
Yeah.
Because I see like, and wouldn't have thought of it here, but like on page 26, school is highlighted. So it's in front of school board, so I presume the school is the addition to that one.
Yes.
Why would that not be the case in previous then?
I don't know, because this is what happens with Neola.
Okay.
They
I
send
mean,
us-
the only reason I ask is because like on 3142, the very first line says the school board recognizes, but then you go down, so like, is that the presumption that when it's identified as school board initially,
What they're
then
called,
board
just
following?
called, somebody made a mistake.
Oh.
That's all it is in a
Okay,
nutshell.
all right. I just didn't know if maybe if it was identified at one time, if
No,
that means
just somebody
specifically following.
didn't add the word in,
And they call it now.
they caught it.
And they didn't catch it on everything. I can tell you there's still places where it's just board, and other places it's, they'll just keep putting revisions
So
out.
that'll be next month's revision.
Yeah.
After the revisions.
It will be.
Oh, by the way.
will be.
Okay.
Use of medication has quite the lengthy revisions. So it provides for definitions of administration, drug, medication, non-prescription drug, practitioner, treatment. A lot of going into how medications may be administered, and how they may be stored, which again, nothing's real surprising there, and it's not, I've worked with our school nurses just to make sure they were comfortable with some of this and what they suggested, so this kind of aligns to what we're doing already. So the first choice there on the bottom of 28, administration of non-prescription drugs, so over the counter, we'll only do that on the written instruction of a practitioner and or parent. And then we usually provide, we have a school supply of non-prescription over-the-counter medications that the parent has to agree. At the beginning of the year, they have a form they fill out. My child may be given Tylenol, acetaminophen, cough drops, Neosporin, whatever the case may be. And it can only be done at the dosage that is prescribed, that is on the medication itself. Any questions on that one? Because there's going to be a lot of different things. We have 2 nurses here, so I know.
Well, you said and or, but if I read the first full highlighting, it will require written instruction on the practitioner and the written consent of the parent. And this is for a non-prescription?
Well, no,
No, that one, I'm sorry, is NAC is,
Non-FDA.
Yeah,
Okay.
natural products and
Okay.
food supplements, yeah.
I guess because, especially our elementary, our school nurse is extremely busy. So if it's not something that's medically required,
Yeah.
we don't really
Like a
want to get
supplement
into
of some sort.
or something in the habit of having to dispense it. And then later on is where, I'm sorry, it does talk about the Tylenol.
I guess in my head, how many practitioners are gonna write an
They're
order
not.
for somebody to give something that's not, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, it's so it's basically not gonna happen.
Because I'm like, yeah.
Yeah.
Which we can say will not be administered, and that probably is just a simple.
Yeah.
I just couldn't
Well,
understand if
it's
there
not-
was a
I mean,
situation.
in case there's somebody who, they do it, then you have it covered, and it doesn't cause a fight later.
I wasn't sure if some of our more medically fragile kids who might have a
Yeah.
G-tube or something.
Sure.
I was gonna say that, yeah.
Yeah,
But, yeah, in those situations, you're gonna have
yeah.
Yeah.
an opportunity for the,
It's more of an exception, but yet
Yeah.
it's have the possibility.
Yes, yeah.
On page 29, again, all drugs shall be kept in a locked storage case. There are certain students that may require something to be, some medication to be delivered intravenously. That should really be done, we would prefer by the nurse, but there are times that someone has to be trained other than the nurse, but that has to be documented that that person was trained to administer. We do have sub-nurses. Usually when we can't get a sub, the nurses try to help cover each other.
And our nurses are all registered nurses?
One is,
Okay, because this wording says registered nurses.
where do you see that? at?
Staff licensed as professional registered nurses in that first paragraph are exempt from the requirement. I just see registered nurse a lot, and so I just want to make sure.
They don't have to be a registered nurse. We have an LPN and a registered nurse, and basically the LPN is operating under the registered nurse's license, and the registered nurse trains her to administer those things, if that makes sense.
It does make sense, yeah. I just didn't know because of the way it's worded.
I think that one was with the training, should be
Okay.
provided by.
Okay.
That doesn't happen real often, but we do have diabetics, and
Mhm.
especially when they're
Right.
little, they don't dose themselves.
Yeah.
Let's see. The school nurses, and I agree that unless it's for an emergency medication that they have express permission to carry on themselves, students should not be possessing, using, carrying, or distributing any type of medication, drug, over the counter, whatever the case may be. And the nurses prefer that even for our older kids, just because when they come in, they've got a headache, they want to know what their dosage has been. And our kids do pretty well with that.
Well, it's not just that, but sharing it with a friend, hey, I have ibuprofen, do you not know that that person's got?
Exactly. There's just too much stuff
Yes.
that's been happening. Let's see, then the next page, we do keep at school emergency medications to be used in emergency situations, albuterol, naloxone, epinephrine, and we do have students who may self-administer. Most of these are talking about inhalers if they have a confirmed, again, a physician's order, they need an inhaler, have asthma-induced, exercise-induced asthma, or asthma, allergies, whatever the case may be. So I support that those students, again, when it's known and documented, may have that. Then they go and specifically talk about the administration of albuterol, epinephrine, I'm probably mispronouncing, naloxone, by the school nurse, and then by someone who is not, who is just a corporation employee. Because especially with some of those situations, if your nurse isn't present,
You have to do it.
somebody has to do it because it can be a life or death situation. And so they do train various staff in our offices on how to administer some of those emergency medications. And then there's another section that has been not added, but revised a little bit on if there's an error in dosing or administering a drug and what needs to happen. And then we'll update our administrative guidelines on medication errors. And then just a little bit on general provisions. Again, there's a lot in there. Next one is, seems a little bit after the fact, but the public hearing before the commencement of collective bargaining had a little bit of change. It can take place at a regular or special board meeting. We did it at a regular board meeting this year, and they inserted the word formal. And then there were also some choices about whether different board members or members of the public could participate via electronic communication. I recommended that for the public hearing that we would not have virtual participation via board members or public. And honestly, that is a meeting that, I take that back. The public hearing is a meeting that you guys usually are not at anyway. It's just usually me and the president of Native, and that's usually in the 5 years I've been doing this, and probably previous, that's all who's ever showed up to it. So Neola really said you just to be aware that what you require of one group, you might want to make sure that you're consistent. For the public meeting, which is what we did tonight, board members may participate virtually, so may the public. I don't really have a strong opinion about may or may not, public may or may not have comment, virtually or not. I just, right now, that one's a little bit harder with live streaming it on Facebook. It's harder to have public comment. We could always read comments, I suppose. But I guess.
Hesitate with that, that could become more confusing.
Yes.
And then confusing to the point where someone says, well, I asked that question and no one paid attention to me.
I think my opinion on that is if you think you have something that you really want to discuss in person, is going to be the best option to get it, make sure it gets heard and addressed. Then the next three I did talk to Scott about this, are schools and governmental agencies, and this is largely hinging upon some of the conversations that have been happening around ICE and their access to students in school. And so a lot of this deals with, in general, law enforcement access to students, the school's response when law enforcement, DCS, ICE, or any other governmental agency may show up and requesting access for interrogation, or to take into custody a student. And so the difficult part of this is there's lots of different opinions on it, and there's been different legal opinions that are somewhat conflicting. So what I have recommended is, this first part isn't contentious really. We do have a memorandum of understanding to have one or more school resource officers, so that one's pretty straightforward. I have no problem cooperating with any governmental agency. I suggested we choose the option that references a judicial warrant as opposed to a judicial or administrative warrant. And Scott, I'm going to lean on you to distinguish the difference between the two.
Well, a judicial warrant is the kind that's issued by a judge who has the authority to issue criminal warrants and things like that. The administrative warrant is done by somebody who's a head of bureaucracy. And what they'll have to do is only that which is from the judicial one is one we have to comply with. The administrative one can be dealt with differently.
So some other recommendations from Neola was picking whether you wanted 12 or 24 hours notice if one of these agencies wanted to interrogate a child, or excuse me, to notify the parent that one of these agencies wanted to interrogate a child. And Scott recommended, and I missed it on page 38, one of those that we need to put probably attempt to notify, because sometimes you can't guarantee you're going to get hold of someone.
Yeah.
And on page 39, toward the middle of that, I have another kind of highlight that this part of the proposed policy is when we request law enforcement to come and assist with an investigation, but we are still the lead investigator. That's what that means, and Scott, again, tell me if I think I'm interpreting this incorrectly. This means at that time, there hasn't been found that there's a criminal.
Right, we're inviting investigation.
Yes. And that honestly can happen quite often. I shouldn't say quite often. It can happen. It has happened, and it will happen almost annually, where you say, "Hey, I don't know what we got here. Do you want to come in and let's talk through what this is?"
This includes the school resource officer being involved.
Well, that's tricky too.
Okay, okay.
And because as a school resource officer, they wear two hats. They can be a school administrator. When we are directing them, they can also function as a law enforcement officer, and they have to be very clear as to which hat they're wearing, as to what rules they have to operate under. When they are operating as an administrator, basically it means they follow the same rules we have to follow.
So in that first pick, number one, where do they fall in that? Are they who you would call, or is this saying?
That is
nobody
who
call
we
the
would
police?
work with first,
Okay.
yes. But as soon as something turns over that there has potentially been a crime committed,
You would call city police?
no,
No.
we still, they could call in city police still, but then they are a law enforcement
That's what
officer
we
at that
flip-
point.
that's what
That,
we do.
they flip their hat.
Okay, okay.
And so that's when, for example, if you're interrogating a student and there's a criminal act, potentially that has happened, they no longer can be part of that interrogation without a parent present. Yes. We can, as school employees, because we're not law enforcement, nothing we're going to do is going to decide whether you're a criminal or not. It's just school and discipline. So can I tell you that there's a lot of gray area in there at times? Yeah.
Sure.
So usually our training has been, if you think something's going to potentially be questioned as criminal, they need to step out and only function as a law enforcement officer. And so far, usually it's okay, but there are those times. But yes, to answer your question, that's why we have an SRO here, but he has to be very careful when something happens that could be criminal, as to, because it can, again, upset the investigation and really create a negligence on his part if he would start investigating correctly. The second one is when law enforcement agents show up and they're there because of their own investigation without us asking for aid. So again, we'll cooperate. The policy states we would probably entreat them that can this be done outside of school hours. That doesn't mean they have to wait for that, but we would probably ask that that happen unless it was a safety risk for the student or for others. The other option is, again, judicial warrant as opposed to a judicial or any warrant. They also suggested, which I selected all but letter B on number 3, that as an administrator, whenever law enforcement would arrive, they would go through some of the same visitor protocols as we have for anyone. They sign in so that we have a record that law enforcement showed up, who was a law enforcement officer, the times they were in and out, trying to respect the student's academic schedule, trying to protect the student's anonymity and integrity as much as possible. And then there's a lot of commentary on here about the school versus the law enforcement's responsibility in trying to contact the parent to let them know that this interrogation interview is happening. Usually it's going to fall on the school to try to do that unless law enforcement would say that's going to be an interruption to the investigative process. In which case we would probably have to take their preferences. So that can get a little dicey sometimes, but lots of times they've already communicated with the parent, because there's not a lot when you're dealing with schools. There's not very many kids that they can come in and actually talk to if the student is a suspect in a crime without a parent. And locally, I will tell you, in those situations, 99.9% of the time, our local law enforcement is simply just going to call the home and ask the parent to bring the child to the station, and that's where they will do their conversations, and that's where it should most of the time happen. Again, sometimes information comes to light that would require something to happen more expeditiously, and that's fine. But our local law enforcement has always been very good at trying to work with families and the school and maintain the integrity of the kid. The next policy is about DCS, not as much, but again, the judicial warrant. This one, I've talked to our DCS liaison here. I'm going to do a little bit more digging. DCS can be a little bit different because they obviously are investigating abuse and neglect, and sometimes they do come to school when a child may need removed from the home and cannot be permitted to return to their home. And so that one is, obviously we want the child to be safe no matter what, and if DCS is involved because there is a question of safety, we want that child to go with whomever is going to maintain their safety. Not as much green on that one. And then the last one, again, it's kind of a repeat of the first one in some respects, with a lot less. Basically, it just says that a governmental agency, again, interrogation of the student, and the judicial warrant, again, there at the bottom of that page is kind of the trigger for the school to give that agency access to the child. Scott, I don't know if you have anything else.
Just to emphasize on the judicial one, that's the one that requires probable cause.
Okay.
The administrative warrant can be based on suspicion or investigative necessity. doesn't have the same force and effect as to why it's being issued.
Mhm.
It's really more of a, judge thinks there's something here,
You have to go.
yeah. Whereas the administrator might say, let's go see if there's something.
Yeah, it's more of a fact finding.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
So it's also not like an emergency
Right.
situation.
We can't avoid court orders. We
No,
don't
yeah.
necessarily have to have an administrative action.
Okay.
Now, you listen to our state attorney general, you want to take that. No, but there's a lot of people that have the same opinion.
Yeah.
Basically, again, we want to be cooperative, but at the same time, we need to protect the schools too.
It's a big, right now, it sure is putting a lot of pressure.
So this was just first reading. That was a lot of information. Please reach out to me if you have questions, comments. As you look through this, you're more than welcome to take your packet. And just let me know.
Okay.
Okay. So next we have the approval of the 25-26 administrator salaries.
I have in your notes that I was just suggesting a $1,500 administrative raise to each administrator. Previously, I'd always kind of done a tiered amount based on different criteria. But again, monies are a little more tight this year, so that's kind of the minimum raise that the staff receive. And I feel like right now that's appropriate for what we're out there.
Okay. Any questions or comments or motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, motion by Wiley, is there a second? Seconded by Darlene. Motion by Wiley, seconded by Darlene to approve the 25-26 administrator salaries as presented. All those in favor announce by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Approved 4-0. Next is the discussion of the 26-27 school calendar.
So we don't have to vote on this tonight. If you want to think about it more, talk about anything, what you see on your notes page is just a mock-up of what I'm recommending based on what I received back from staff and community surveys about the 26-27 calendar. And then I kind of just gave you a summary chart of different people's input. So the first column, or second column rather, are staff. We had about 181 staff reply. Community had 336 reply. The first question I asked them is, do you still prefer a full week fall break, or would you rather have 2 to 3 days? Half on each preferred the full week still, although that number is diminishing. It's kind of a surprising.
That's interesting.
number.
Yeah.
I think what I was told is probably the difference between the people who go somewhere and the people who
Yeah.
don't go somewhere. And that may be winter break. So here's a caveat with winter break. All of us would love 2 full weeks. Maybe if you have to have and find childcare, maybe not.
Yeah.
But if you look at the top where the mock-up is to the far right, I kind of have a breakdown of the number of days in semester 1, semester 2. I never really get too worked up that things are exactly balanced because semester 2 always has, if you're going to have winter, snow days, more delay days. So it's okay that semester 2 is a little bit longer. If we would really lengthen Christmas break, we're starting to get into that range where it gets way too much longer, or first semester gets way too short comparatively. It's a problem for high school. It's usually a bigger problem for dual credit classes that have a 1 semester course and trying to get the 1 semester for their prescribed final exam to get the amount of curriculum in they need to get in if it gets way too imbalanced. The other problem, excuse me, can happen is if kids in high school especially have too few grades being taken, and it becomes a problem in that first 9 weeks when you spend the first few days just trying to get to know each other and get procedures set and expectations out, and they don't get a lot of grades and they might only have 1 or 2 tests or a project or something. If a kid does poorly on one of those, then they don't have much time or many other opportunities to really recoup that. And so when things get too short, it really has a negative domino effect on high school grades lots of times. So I try to watch that. By and large, community, 63% wanted the start Christmas break December 23rd, come back, have students come back on January 5th. Staff would come back on January 4th for our teacher workday. About 51% of staff said the same thing. There still were more staff that wanted the full 2 weeks, and I get it, but we're pretty close.
Yeah.
We're pretty close. Commencement for those, it was staff members, high school staff members, and parents who had kids that were going to be seniors next year. I offered Friday, excuse me, there's a typo there. Friday, May 28th was the first. I can tell you after talking to high school guidance, they're like, if the last student day is Tuesday or Wednesday, we can't get transcripts turned around that quickly. So I'm going to tell you, we're probably going to have to go with the second choice, which is Friday, June 4th, to have commencement, just to give them plenty of time to talk to students, have rehearsal, get transcripts finished up so that those can be handed out the night of commencement. And then we had a few extra days in there that we needed to give off per se. And so I had them rank which of these days they wanted the most. By and large, everyone wanted the day before Thanksgiving, which as a mom cooking for Thanksgiving would have been my first choice too. Second choice was to again have December 21st, which would have made the really more than 2 full weeks at Christmas. I explained now we probably can't do that with giving off the day before Thanksgiving and starting, I forgot to put in there, everyone wanted to start the week of the 10th for the most part, was the highest one in August. The second one was the Friday before spring break, and so that 19th of March was the second choice. I was really surprised because next year, Easter falls that Sunday, which ends spring break, and so we put in there, would you like to have the Monday off after Easter, which is usually what a lot of people comment, but that was the last of the choices, which again, compared to everything else, I kind of understand when you have to make kind of forced choices, how that may be, but so again, we don't have to vote on this tonight, but I would like to probably get it on the books next month.
Okay.
I have a couple of questions. How many surveys were sent out?
Well, everyone received them because it was digital.
Okay.
So it says 336 community responded, 181 staff responded.
When you say everyone received them, so like one member of each family would have received, or every?
Justin, does it just go to one contact, or I think it probably goes to whoever's noted on.
How did you send it? Did you send it through school messenger? Did you send it text and email? The text can go to pretty much whoever signed up and opted into our text messages. So that could be multiple in the family. That's kind of just whoever it is. Email, it's it's kind of whoever's on the email list. So like, depending on what's in Power School and how families set up their communications
So they get
list.
to choose who and what communications they receive. So some people don't give their cell phone, some people only give their cell phone, some people don't give email.
But at least you have, ideally,
A
you
person.
have one person from each family that would receive it.
Yeah, based off what she said, everybody should have at least gotten it somewhere.
If they have correct information in our system.
Yes.
Sometimes folks change cell phones, for example, and it didn't get updated, but I would say, when I send it to what is called the entire district, it goes to over 4,200.
See, and that's why I'm saying that's such a low response for the amount of conversation that typically takes place with, well, why are we going here and why aren't we going here? So that's why I asked that.
They had the opportunity though.
No,
You know what I'm saying? Like-
Yeah, no, but then I guess what I'm asking too then is, on average, are we seeing more where it doesn't matter if we don't have school this day or whatever, we're seeing an increase in student absences? Are we trending upward?
No, I would say the day that probably produces the most student absences is the day before spring break, the Friday before spring break, in this community, anyway. It's kind of just historically, at least in my tenure here, those people who are going to go away on spring break, many of them go ahead and leave.
More and more I have over the years
Yeah.
chosen to,
Good Friday, only
yeah,
Thursday.
and in some cases,
That's what I'm saying. So does it really matter if you do a full week of fall break or if you have to make an adjustment, things like that? I mean, like you said, it doesn't matter what day you give, there's always gonna be that extra potential that, I mean, so I guess in my head, I'm just kind of trying to think of it that
Yeah.
way.
As far as increased absenteeism, the one that I would note would be the Friday before spring break. The day after Easter, that's more of a help, probably more to staff, the people who are sponsoring Easter at their home or traveling, or families who travel for Easter. I would say the same thing is, we would see an increase in staff absenteeism, not huge, but a few, day before Thanksgiving. You can tell who has to travel or who is hosting. I wouldn't say a ton of students the day before Thanksgiving unless they're going a distance. Christmas, no. I mean, there's always, no, I wouldn't say, I don't know. I don't think so. We don't have a ton of kids like showing at the state fair either, so we don't, depending on the school you're in, you might see differences in the beginning of year. That's not been a huge thing for us for the last several years. I don't know.
Okay.
I do think we have a lot more people going away for fall break than we ever did.
That's because it's an option now, where it wasn't before.
Right.
I mean,
It is.
and although we were getting, several years back, we were getting people just taking their own fall break.
Oh, yeah. I think the people that I see, there are some who are doing both spring break and fall break. There are a sect of people, I think, especially whose kids are involved in either late winter or spring sports, who go away on fall break because they are in season and or doing travel ball or things on spring break. I've heard of some of that. I'm still here. But, maybe I'm not answering your question.
No, you're fine.
I'm hearing you. Exactly.
You're also not going to make everybody happy.
No,
either.
for sure.
As hard as you might try.
This year, again, we've started a little earlier than some because I hate bringing kids back. I refuse to bring kids back after May 31st. But the 31st this year it's falling a little differently.
Sometimes, yeah, it depends on how the
Yeah.
calendars fall as it's.
So that kind of helped us be able to start a little later. And then I can tell you, some of our area schools, I think, are looking at the week of the 10th to start. So that helps. It's not a deal breaker, but it helps with CTE and things where we share kids.
Mhm.
Let me know any other questions. I'm more than happy to try to answer them. Superintendent's report. Speaking of fall break, next week is it. And I think everybody's ready for a little break, even though this time it seems to go exponentially fast. We also are kind of in the middle of parent-teacher conferences right now. I think the elementary is tomorrow. First quarter ended already. Our lease bonds sold in the last 2 weeks, and
Good.
they did well. Yeah, I think we got an A+ rating, so that's good. I want to, and I'm going to probably put Justin on the spot here, but I want to give a shout out to our girls soccer team who is it a 10-peat, I think. This is their 10th sectional win in a row. That is awesome, so congratulations to them. And great job. And then our middle school boys and girls cross country teams had a phenomenal season. So Justin, you want to recap that since you're the coach?
I'm one of the coaches.
One of your coaches, you and Christy.
Yeah, we had a good year. Boys won the first conference championship for the school. We had the boys individual champ and runner-up at conference. And then we had the individual state champion, and the boys got 10th in our division, and then our girls got 4th. So they were an all-state team. And then outside of the individual state champ, we had 2 other all-state kiddos, 1 boy and 1 girl. So it was pretty good.
That's awesome.
Yeah, very, very big day for them, and they did great. And it's a hard sport, and we're probably gonna bring them in next month to recognize them collectively and individually for their achievements. Also wanna give a shout out to Ella Hockemeyer, with golf. She really distinguished herself this year and showed really well, so congratulations to her. Justin, I'm gonna lean on you again. Am I forgetting anything on the fall?
Girls soccer and girls volleyball won the NE8.
That's right. Both NE8 champions, and that's been, I forget, on volleyball, what was that?
6.
6?
6 for girls volleyball. Is it 3 for soccer? I don't know. Don't listen to me for soccer. I don't know. It's been a number in a row. I know that. Maybe it was 5.
One of them was a 10-peat, I thought.
Sectional girls soccer sectionals with 10P. I can find this pretty fast.
He's the one that posts all these. We actually can bring it up. Regardless, congratulations to all our fall sports athletes for having a good fall, showing the ones in particular who have
3rd for soccer.
done well in postseason. And then we are getting ready to start postseason football and volleyball, and believe it or not, fall sports is wrapping up here in the next month. So it still feels like Indian summer out there.
Let's keep it as long as we can.
Yes.
The golfers love it.
I bet. I think that's all I have tonight.
Okay. Any other matters coming before the board? Board member public comment?
There is this
Oh, yeah.
packet here that Gloria copied for us. This came out of the September conference, the school board conference. First, they passed the legislative, passed the priorities that ISBA will put forth this coming year for 2026. And then also the foundational statements. So when ISBA is working with legislators, the statements that this would be the focus during the legislative session. So I thought share that with the board, just to give a little understanding of what our association is doing.
That's great.
And we'll be doing this next year.
Yeah.
Even though it's not a budget year, the last several years, those non-budget years have still been very active.
They have. I dream of the year when legislators will go to Indianapolis and say, hey, I don't think we need to do anything this year. Let's just all go home. I know.
It would be great. It would be great. But
Awesome.
thank you for that, Lauren.
Thank you. All right, I think that's it. We can adjourn. Thank you.